Sometimes in life, you fail so hard that you feel lost, incapable, like you don't belong. And as a lawyer, when you're expected to always be on top of things, this can feel overwhelming. And I've had my fair share of epic failures, moments when I thought that I had destroyed my legal career completely. But then, looking back, I realized that those failures were some of the best learning experiences of my life. And today, I want to share the 3 biggest failures of my legal career, how they happened, and most importantly, what they taught me. So let's dive right in. And by the way, before I forget, my name is Federich. I'm an international lawyer based in Brussels, Belgium, and my goal on YouTube is to provide value to at least one person per video, hopefully more than one person. Okay, failure number 1. Where are we and when? It's 2012, I'm in London, and I'm a fresh LLM student at the London School of Economics. And as you can imagine, coming from Sardinia, this was my first real exposure to a highly dynamic and a highly competitive legal environment, not just with my colleagues and peers, but in general also in London, which is a very dynamic city. And in this competitive environment, at one point around fall 2012, the university sent me an email. I was attending a competition law course, and the university sent an email to all the students attending competition law courses. Essentially, one of the most prestigious American law firms, Creeley Gottlieb, with offices all over the world, wanted to host an event, a full-day selection event in the city of London, in their offices in the city of London, and I was invited. And the thing is that there was a pre-selection process. Only the best students in the top 5 law schools in the UK were invited, and I was one of those. So after submitting my transcripts and my CV, I was invited. I was one of those. I was one of the best students in the top 5 law schools in the UK. Even more interestingly, the law firm had informed my university that they would have hired 1 or 2 people during that selection process for their Brussels office, which sounded like a dream to me. In fact, Brussels is the EU hub for competition and in general EU law, and this sounded to me like the ultimate opportunity. So I remember on the day of the selection, I was ironing my shirt and my hands were shaking. I had a lot of second thoughts. I was thinking, okay, maybe I should not go. I'm not able to do it. I'm not capable. But in the end, I forced myself and I went. But I felt overwhelmed by the pressure and the stakes. And I remember walking through the city of London with a lot of thoughts going through my mind and with a lot of doubts and questions running through my head. So the day would have consisted in a presentation by the firm, then a mock competition case where we would have had to engage in different groups, then interviews with senior associates, and then finally networking drinks. So I arrived at the firm and I was feeling overwhelmed. I see these students from Oxford, Cambridge, and some of them, they were reading legal textbooks right on the spot to prepare for the interview. I felt really scared. So we start with a group exercise, with a mock test, and some people start arguing, start making very valid points, great points, and I was thinking, okay, I'm not saying anything, what should I do? And at one point, after having been silent for half an hour, I felt the need to intervene. The issue is that my point made no sense. Total no sense. I mumbled something which I can't even recall, and people look at me as if I was dumb. But okay, we move on. We move to the interview with the senior associates, and I start introducing myself, and things are going quite right. Until one moment, the moment when they asked me about my transcripts. That's where my world collapsed. One of the senior associates literally says, "Your transcripts are very good. The only issue is, we don't understand if your name is Federich or Gabriele." I had accidentally sent them the transcripts of a friend of mine with whom I was preparing the Italian bar exam instead of my own transcripts. Complete disaster. No way to explain it. I knew I had blown up my chances. And okay, despite the embarrassment, the days that followed the interview, I had a lot of questions and I came to certain conclusions, certain learnings. First of all, too much pressure ruins your performances. I felt like I had to prove myself at all costs, which led to rushed, uncalculated decisions. Secondly, silence sometimes is the best thing you can do. If you don't have something valuable to say, don't force it, don't say anything. And then, always double check your documents, always double check what you're sending. One small administrative mistake can make a huge difference in high-stakes professional settings. And here we are with failure number 2. Where are we now? We are in Brussels. It's autumn 2014, 2 years after the failure in London. We are now in Brussels, and I'm a junior associate in an international law firm. It's my first serious legal experience in an international law firm in Brussels and in an international law firm in general. And it's a high-pressure environment. I'm working on very big cases and I'm working very long hours. I remember my first day of work work at this law firm, I left the firm at 11 p.m. And at one point, after a couple of months in the job, my bosses tasked me with preparing a response from a request for information from a national regulator. Preparing the response would have involved compiling large amount of confidential financial information from the client company. And I start the task with enthusiasm, and I start working days and night to meet a very tight deadline. And the response was very voluminous, filled with very important financial figures, projections, annual revenues, sensitive data. And I managed to submit everything on the day of the deadline at around 11 p.m., like 1 hour before the deadline. And I was desperate to leave the firm and finally breathe and go home and rest for a couple of days. And then I move on. I move on to other tasks, I move on to other cases, and I almost forget of this. Until a moment. In fact, weeks later, I go back to that document. I go back to that response because I had to check certain information. And what did I realize? I realized a major mistake. Probably while wrapping up the response, I had accidentally deleted some financial figures for one financial year. I completely panicked. There were implications with the regulator. There were implications with my bosses. There were implications with myself. And the worst thing is that if the regulator discovered it, the company could have been fined with a high amount for filing incorrect information. So I immediately informed my boss, and his reaction was extreme stress. We had no other choice but reaching out to the regulator and praying. And after weeks of uncertainties where we explained that it was a clear material error and that it wasn't meant to be an intentional error, the regulator came back and they said that they understood the mistake, they corrected it, and there were no further consequences. Lucky escape, and there was a lot to learn from this experience. Why? First of all, because attention to detail is non-negotiable when you work as a lawyer. No matter how exhausted you are, reviewing your work meticulously is essential in your work in such environments. Secondly, excuses don't matter. Despite the fact that the submission was huge, that I worked long hours for many days, it was my mistake, and it was an avoidable mistake, and nothing changed this. Thirdly, own up to your mistakes as quickly as possible. In fact, the sooner you flag an error, the better. My God! In fact, the sooner you flag an error, the better your chances to correct it and limit the consequences before it escalates. And then my failure number 3, and we are again in Brussels and it's 2016 this time. And after years of working in international law firms, after years of working in private practice, after many applications, I finally got an interview with the European Commission. I got it! And it was my dream to become a lawyer of the European Commission. I've been wanting this job for a very long time. I've been trying for a very long time, so I want to make it. So I start preparing, and I prepare for weeks. But at the same time, I let the pressure get to me. And the worst thing is that my job at that time was a nightmare. I was really having a bad time, and I was also struggling in relationships with some colleagues. So this was my only way out, and I was hoping for it so much. So on the day of the interview, I entered the European Commission building, the building of Digi Competition, which is where I work right now, and I make it to the room of the interview where I meet the panel and the head of unit. And immediately I feel that the head of unit was very cold and distant. No empathy, no warmth, no encouragement. I immediately felt uncomfortable. So the moment they start asking me questions, instead of thinking about the questions and thinking about the responses in my head, I rushed the responses. I tried to fill the silence with my own words, but I was not thinking about what I was saying. I was not being precise and concise. And the head of unit, he immediately understood that, and he started testing me with even tougher questions. So I panicked and I started really giving no sense responses. And at one point, after 5 minutes speaking and giving a very disconnected response, the head of unit also says that he knew my boss at that time and he would have liked to ask him whether I was a good candidate, whether I was a good employee, a good lawyer. He literally asked me what I thought my boss would have said about me. And there I panicked even more because I wanted to leave my at that time job. So this head of unit couldn't go to my boss and ask him that I was interviewing for a position in this unit. And not only that, at one point, they started testing me in my 4th language, which completely caught me off guard. So I left the interview room feeling humiliated, head down. They never wrote me back. But again, also out of this situation, I learned a lot. And what did I learn? First of all, never panic, even if things get very bad. Staying calm is the only way to think clearly, especially as a lawyer. Secondly, don't let others destabilize you. Some people will do it for the sake of doing it. Some people will do it because they want to test you. They want to push you to see where your limit is. But the thing is, how you handle pressure defines not only your career, but also your life. And the third thing is, confidence is everything. If you don't believe yourself, No one else will. So all these failures, they stuck with me. They embarrassed me. But hey, looking back, you know what? They were incredible learning experiences. And again, there's some key lessons from failures. First of all, pressure can cloud judgment. You have to stay calm. You have to stay in control all the times. Mistakes happen. They happen at any level. But the way you handle them is what sets you apart. The way you handle mistakes matters more than the mistakes themselves. And finally, failure isn't the opposite of success. It's just part of it. It's just part of the journey. In fact, when I first entered the legal world, especially in international and competitive environments, I thought that failure was unacceptable. But the truth is, we all make mistakes, even the most important and most knowledgeable people in this world. And in the end, mistakes, they shape us into better professionals and better persons. So what is your most epic failure? Let's make this a conversation, and if you feel like it, drop it in the comments. And if you want to hear more about my legal journey, check out my video on how I became an international lawyer. And if you enjoyed the video or if you found it useful, please like, comment and subscribe to the channel. It would help me very much in my YouTube journey. Let's keep this discussion going to the next one. Peace. Keep failing.